Hello everybody and welcome to my thoughts and review video for Solo, a Star Wars story. As many of you know, or maybe if you don't because you're new to the channel, I am a stupid big Star Wars fan. There's no other way to say it. I've done plenty of videos on different Star Wars games and movies. I love the franchise. I read pretty much all of the books. I've skipped a couple here and there of the new stuff, but I am really into Star Wars. That's just the easiest way to say. So this is going to be my review for Solo, which I'm going to start off with a spoiler-free how I thought about the movie, and then I'll jump into spoilers so you can kind of get an idea whether or not, you want to go see the movie because maybe you're hearing bad things, or maybe you're hearing good things, or maybe you're hearing what everybody else is hearing, which is very mixed things because people don't know how to make up their damn mind. So we'll jump into that, and I'm also going to briefly talk about how I will be putting up my Last Jedi thoughts, which seems a little late, right? That came out in the winter, but I'm going to be putting those up rather soon. A very in-depth video of my thoughts on that movie because it was very divisive, and I think it's important to kind of talk about why that is. The reason I've waited so long, there's pretty good reason, is that I didn't want to put out a video that was going to kind of stir the pot when the movie came out, because I don't think people would have been receptive to really honest and in-depth feedback on that movie and what I thought about it. So instead, I decided I'd wait a bit, maybe a little longer than I should have before getting that out. But look forward to that within, the next week or so. Outside of that, we have Solo to talk about. So let me give you my spoiler-free thoughts. So, I believe it is a really fun little action flick that is definitely set within the Star Wars universe. There's a lot of really cool Star Wars stuff in it that you would expect out of a Star Wars movie, and for the most part, it's totally worth seeing. Got a lot of small little references that connect the dots between the continuities, maybe answer some questions that we weren't expecting or didn't really need answers to, but at the same time, it's kind of nice to have. I feel like the movie does a really good job of providing motivations for the separate characters, and that bridges the gap between this movie and the original trilogy, which I think is really cool. And just generally speaking, I thought it was really fun, but this is coming from somebody who had no expectations of this movie. I was not really excited for it. I didn't pre-purchase tickets. I was just kind of like, I'll go see it when I want to see it. Happened to be in the mood to see it, so I went and just went to the theater and got it done, and it's like, okay, I'm not expecting this movie to be good, especially with the fact that they fired the old directors and then brought in Ron Howard, which, by the way, I feel like he did a fantastic job, but it's hard to tell what is the old stuff and what's the new stuff. Or maybe the whole thing was reshot. Who knows? I don't know. We probably won't really know for some time now, but generally speaking, I thought it was a good movie. It surprised me. I walked out of the movie theater smiling. Was it an excellent movie? No, I thought it was just like a fun little action movie. It's a dumb little action movie, and that's kind of the point of it, and I see that now. It definitely feels way different than the rest of the Star Wars movies, even though it is certainly a Star Wars movie. You'll see that when you actually go and see the movie. But outside of that, I don't really have any criticisms of it. It was just fun. It wasn't great, but it was fun. And I think there's totally a space for that kind of movie, especially within the Star Wars universe, where not every movie has to be like this huge, impactful thing that changes the universe. It doesn't have to be, a trilogy movie, or even Rogue One, as good as it was, and I believe that it had many, many flaws, and I probably didn't like it as much as most people. I still felt like it was, it was too big. The movie may have been too big for itself, but I think it worked really well in the context of that movie. This movie doesn't really need to do that. It's just like this small, fun action movie that's got a pretty good plot to it, surprisingly. And for the criticisms coming at, some of the actors, I think Alden does a really good job of playing Han Solo. Some people didn't like him. They're like, oh, it doesn't feel like Han Solo. It's like, no, it literally feels like a young Han Solo, in my opinion. And he does a really good job of portraying that. And I think a lot of people came out of the movie theater who were expecting it to be good, or were wanting it to be, Harrison Ford, were disappointed. But they were signing up for a young Han Solo movie, and this guy does a perfect job of replicating that. It's like they bought a box of Cheerios and went, I can't wait to get my frosted flakes, and they open it up and they're like, Wait, it's a box of Cheerios. It's like, yeah, it said it on the box. It's a box of Cheerios. It's a young Han Solo movie. The guy plays a young Han Solo. He does a great job of it. And there's a lot of little things like his confidence isn't always there, and it's kind of feigned along a lot of the time in the movie. And that's kind of what a young Han Solo would do. He doesn't have his confidence yet. He's not so like snarky and everything. He's got a bit of that, but it's not quite there. There's got to be room to grow. And I think Alden does a great job of portraying young Han Solo. As far as other characters, like Donald Glover kills it as Lando. He does a perfect Lando. Like literally, it sounds like him, and it's just really good. And all the other characters in the movie are very good too. We'll talk about that in the spoiler part of it. But should you see this movie? Yes, go in with no expectations, and you'll enjoy yourself. Come out probably with a huge smile on your face. It's fun. It's a good story, and it's a good addition to the Star Wars universe, I believe. And I'm actually sitting over here being like, okay, well, where's the next movie for this? Like, is there going to be another Han Solo movie? I can't wait for that Boba Fett movie they just announced. But like, what's all this going to do? Because I'm excited to see these characters again in another movie. I want to see what Han Solo does next in the gap between this and A New Hope, and we'll kind of get excited for that. But who knows if they'll do it. I think this movie was great, and yeah, you definitely should go see it. With that said, I am now moving into spoiler territory. So you have a second to close out of the video and go watch the movie if you haven't seen it already. Otherwise, you're going to get spoiled. Okay, you better be gone, because now I'm going to start talking about spoilers. So I feel like this movie is definitely not without its flaws. It definitely has flaws, but they're not so glaring, and they're not so sinful, I would say, as some of the flaws in The Last Jedi. While I'll go into it in great detail in my Last Jedi video, there are some really, really, really outstanding moments in that movie that are just like some of the best things you'll ever see in a Star Wars movie are in The Last Jedi. But some of the most egregious mistakes and worst scenes you'll ever see in a Star Wars movie are in that movie too. This movie doesn't have that. This movie just has a couple flaws, and it doesn't really have the huge standout moments necessarily. It's got a couple that are really cool, but it doesn't have like the throne room scene from The Last Jedi, for instance, or the hyperspace jump attack and everything like that. It doesn't have those, but it does have some cool stuff. I think the biggest flaw is that this movie's flow is a little slow at times, and when the action picks up, it really picks up. It starts moving. It's really cool. It's really fast. It's awesome. It's fun. That's why it's a fun action film. But in particular, I feel like the beginning of the movie is quite slow. So it starts on Corellia, which is great. It's cool to finally see Corellia in an actual movie, because that's where most of the shipyards for the Empire were and continue to be. It's a big shipyard just area. That's where they build most of the ships, or a good chunk of the ships in the actual universe is at Corellia. And we get to see Han Solo growing up on the streets of Corellia and escaping that life. I feel like that intro bit, while cool to see Corellia, I was more excited to see Corellia than I was anything else in that first part of the movie. It just felt very slow, and I remember even thinking like, this is okay. I think I could be having more fun, but this is okay. I wasn't in particular enthralled by that. Again, I was more excited just seeing Corellia and kind of like picking things out, being like, ooh, what's that? Ooh, what's that? Ooh, that's cool. As opposed to being anywhere interested in what the heck was going on with him leaving the planet. In fact, there's even a very slow speed chase on the planet. And there was a bit that got me, which was when he flips the speeder on the side to like go through the alleyway, and Emilia Clarke's character Kira was like, we're not going to make it. And he's like, go watch this. And he gets all cocky, and he's going through, and it's going. And by the end of it, it's kind of like seizes up at the end. Like I felt like, oh, that was really funny. He's not quite there yet, but that was one of the two standout moments in that. It was cool going to the Empire checkpoint, where there was pretty much, I don't remember the name of the song, but they had redone the Imperial March. I think it's like Glory of the Empire or something like that, in a major key, and you get to hear that playing in that scene. And I think the only other time that we've heard this playing with, I think was in Clone Wars or Rebels. I don't remember which one it was entirely, but it's really cool to have that in this movie at that like Empire checkpoint. It's also really, I think the other standout moment for me in this beginning of the film was him going and signing up for the Empire, because we kind of knew that he was an Empire defector, but we didn't know how that ended up happening. And for him to go over and join the Navy and try to become a pilot and ultimately get kicked out of the pilot program, I think is really cool to kind of see that beginning. But the whole like first maybe 10-20 minutes of the movie felt very slow to me, and I didn't quite enjoy it as much. I think the rest of the movie is very good, but that little beginning bit could have been way better. So honestly, outside of that like pacing issue, I think that you kind of feel at the beginning and in a couple of scenes later on, the movie doesn't really have any glaring flaws. And if that's its only huge flaw, then I'm totally okay with that, at least in my opinion. I don't think there's any other flaws with the movie. I think the rest of the movie is really fun and even has some good pacing and some other good parts to it. I think some of the humor falls flat, and I'll talk about that in a bit, but outside of that, I think the movie's great. It's got some really good twists and turns within the story. It gives a really good backstory for Han Solo. It shows moments that we probably wanted to see, but didn't really need to see, like the Kessel Run and Han Solo swindling Lando into getting the Millennium Falcon, which is awesome. And the whole, by the way, I swear, if you haven't seen this movie, you better turn off now, because I'm gonna give the twist away. Having Darth Maul at the end of the movie was awesome, and I have a lot to say about that as a Star Wars fan, because I know kind of what happened to him after the Phantom Menace, and a lot of people don't. A lot of people didn't go watch the animated series stuff, so they don't kind of understand the history behind there. So seeing him, it's just kind of like, whoa, he's still alive, I see a lot of people complaining like that, he should definitely be dead. But for the most part, it seems like people who do know what happened to him are kind of like gently explaining like, oh no, like this is the thing there. And it's cool to see him in the movie. So, I like I said, I feel like there's really good twists and turns, and we'll talk about those as we go through. I'm going to kind of like break down the movie from start to finish. So you have them, as I said earlier, escaping Corellia. And then they go to a planet called Mimban, which is that really cool trench warfare scene where like the AT-ST gets dropped down, or is it AT-AT gets dropped down? No, it's ST, next to them, and they're all muddy and they're gross and they're fighting, and it's awesome. And then we're introduced to Woody Harrelson's character, which is Beckett, and he's kind of this like gunslinger character, and he's awesome. He looks like an officer, but he's clearly not. He's clearly not part of the Empire. It was a really cool scene because it shows you the darkness of how the actual war happens within Star Wars. It's kind of a good thing that Rogue One did, is like, Star Wars isn't necessarily this really clean lightsabers have no blood thing. It's a little bit more darker than that, the actual warfare that goes on. And to show that the war actually is taking its toll, and what the Empire was actually doing and what kind of crimes it was committing is a really cool way to put it on film, and I think they did a great job of it. In fact, that whole planet scene where they're on Mimban is really good because it gives you an idea of the motivations behind Han Solo a lot better. He's on the planet, he's talking to these officers, and the officers like we are trying to take this planet so that we can protect these people from outsiders or something like that. And Han Solo basically says like, but we're the outsiders, like, don't you see that? And that is definitely a point of view that the Empire wouldn't want someone sharing, but he does it anyways, and you kind of get an idea of, oh, this is why he doesn't really like the Empire. This shows his like negativity towards it. It's because he saw firsthand what the Empire was doing to I guess coagulate the rest of the universe into their like weird amoeba, their governmental amoeba that they have. And it was just really cool to see what his motivation was there. I think they did a really good job of it. But then after that, you have him joining up with Beckett and the other two characters, which I don't remember the alien's name, but he was kind of cool. and Val, which is like Beckett's like romantic interest in the movie. And I feel like she could have had a lot more screen time because she's a really great actress and she's a really good character. I feel like her character was fun for what we saw of it. But kind of killing her off early on felt like a shame. It felt like a waste of a character. But at the same time, it was a good use of that character because it kind of showed how Beckett sees people and how kind of ruthless he is throughout the rest of the movie, and how he's sad that he lost her, but at the same time he's not like broken up about it, and you're like, okay, I kind of see this guy has seen some loss in his time. The whole heist scene on that planet, which I think the planet's name was Vandor, and they were stealing the coaxium from there. I thought it was really cool having the Cloud Riders come in, which are like that mercenary group, come in and try to steal it back. And it was an exciting little scene. It was definitely a train heist. It was very Western. It was really cool. I thought all of that was really good. And the fight scene on the train itself was really good. But at the same time, it felt like it kind of went on a little too long. Like they could have taken a couple minutes out of that fight scene, I think, and it would have been fine. It just felt like it drug on a bit. However, moving straight from that into meeting Dryden, which is kind of the big bad guy of the film, being introduced to the Crimson Dawn, which is like this crime syndicate, is one of the better introductions to a villain we've gotten in Star Wars in a long time. Outside of like the Emperor and Darth Vader, in my opinion, like they have great introductions to those villains. But in this movie, you get introduced to Dryden in a way that you kind of see that he is a little bit crazy and something weird is going on with him, but you don't necessarily get it explained to you. And I think this is a really important thing within storytelling is showing, not telling. And they showed that he was a little crazy and unstable and had power, but at the same time, they didn't need to explain it to you. They just showed it, and I felt like that was really well done. And I think that's why Dryden, as a villain, does a really good job of being a really great villain for the rest of the movie. Outside of that, they go and meet Lando. That whole scene is great. And the sabacc table, and how we learn that Lando is cheating at sabacc, which is how he's managed to win. There's some references there. Actually, there's references throughout this entire movie we'll go back and we'll talk about in a moment here. But then getting him to sign up for the mission to leave for Kessel, and then arriving at Kessel, which is great to see because we've heard about Kessel so much within, various outside stuff, like the Clone Wars series. I'm pretty sure they don't show it, and I think it's Rebels that does show it. It's one of those two. It's that or flip-flopped. I don't remember which one it is. But we do know that there is I think it's the Pikes or whatever are mining on Kessel, and they're mining spice. So it's kind of cool to actually like see it in a movie, and for them to go there and everything was really fun. The nebula space cloud was cool. It was really well done. The effects were great. Them infiltrating Kessel and getting the coaxium and bringing out that whole heist scene tied in with the like slave rebellion that was started by L3 is really, really good. I really enjoyed all of that. And pretty much from then on for the rest of the movie, I felt like it was just completely amazing. Like once they got off of Kessel, from that towards the rest of the movie, I felt like the movie was like an A for me. So it just kind of got better as it went. Because then you have the escape from Kessel, the Kessel Run, which was, I don't think we needed to see it, but it was kind of cool that they did it anyways, with the gravity well and everything. And then them going to the planet, I think it's Savarin. I don't remember the name of it, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is, where they were going to refine the coaxium, and having just like a really great, like that whole last part of the movie when they're on that planet, I think is really good. There's a lot of payoff with the twists and turns. You've got them bringing the coaxium there, Lando taking off and leaving Han behind, which is really good because it actually kind of ties into the end of the movie. I'll talk about that in a moment. So you have that. You have the call out for the 12 parsecs, and how, Chewie is doing the whole, it was 13, and he goes, not if you round down. Like, I think that is really good with their relationship that they have. But the fact that Enfys Nest, which is the leader of the Cloud Riders comes down, and they learn that essentially they are these like there's children who were trying to start a rebellion against the Empire because their planets were essentially taken over, which we saw at the beginning of the movie with the trench warfare. So you get to see that actually happening, which is cool, and how they're essentially giving the coaxium over to those people, even if the other characters like Kira and Beckett don't necessarily agree with that. And Kira does a really good job of telling Han Solo, like, no, you're a good guy. You don't understand it, but you're a good guy, even if you want to be a scoundrel, which is stuff that we see in the other films. We see that as his kind of core character, even if he tries to hide it. So that was like a good call out. But the whole like triple betrayal thing at the end was great. It's funny because it's like they take the coaxium to Dryden, and he starts calling him out for it being fake. And I'm watching the movie, I'm thinking, I don't think that's fake. I think that's the real stuff. I think they brought it to him, which is really interesting. Why would they bring it to him? And I was kind of like trying to work it out in the movie, and then all of a sudden you have the betrayal of Beckett. Beckett comes up and is like, yeah, sorry, kid. Like, I told him that you were going to give him the fake stuff and I was going to walk off and everything. But, I get paid this way and I don't die from Dryden. And then it is revealed by Han Solo, like, no, this is the real stuff. The stuff that we gave to the Cloud Riders, that's not, they know they're actually going to not betray, but they're going to ambush the people who are going out there to get the coaxium. So they take out all the guards, which is a great scene with the chick coming down with the staff and everything. It was really cool. They did a good job of that. And the twist of like Beckett realizing like, oh, power has shifted here. And he makes the choice to like take the coaxium and Chewie, because he can carry it, like down and try to make his getaway while Dryden and Kira and Solo have to fight it out. And the fact that then you have Kira doing the killing of Dryden, and then Kira essentially being like, no, you go on, you go get your coaxium, because she knows who Dryden answers to. And she knows, and this is kind of a cool motivation if you kind of understand the Darth Maul plotline, like, she knows she's not going to get away from this. And you see that throughout the entire movie. She sees that she's kind of stuck in this lifestyle, and he isn't yet. So she does her thing where she's like, in a way, it's kind of a sacrifice. She's sacrificing herself to like go and take this power so that way he can get away. But at the same time, it is a betrayal, which is kind of cool. And I liked that. And then Han Solo going down to face off with Beckett. And we get to see Han Solo shoot first, which is just fantastic. It was just so good that that whole last part of the movie felt like I was in it. At the beginning of the movie, I wasn't. I was like, yeah, this is okay. Corellia is cool, but I'm not necessarily entertained. And then by the end of the movie, I'm like, this is awesome. This is such a good little twist of everything going on. It feels like a heist movie. It feels like an action movie. Seeing all that happen felt very much like the Star Wars underworld, and all like the criminals and smugglers and everything. Like, it felt very much in that vein, and I really, really enjoyed it. Especially the last scene where Han Solo goes and finds Lando and does the I'm mad at you, and then sees the card holder that Lando was using to cheat, and then suddenly goes in for the hug, like, oh no, it's fun, it's good pals, because that's a reference, straight back to when they're at Cloud City and Lando does the exact same thing to him, except this time, Han Solo takes the card away, manages to stop Lando from cheating, which Lando then, as we see in future films, calls it a swindle. He swindled the Millennium Falcon out from underneath him. And then that's how Han Solo gets the Millennium Falcon, and that explains the story for, what we see while they're at Cloud City when they're talking about that. It's great. Like, that whole movie is so good, especially once you get to the second and the third act. I think it really picks up and it gets really fun, and the action is really, really good. I really enjoyed it. It's definitely lasted on me a lot longer, as in, I saw like The Last Jedi, and I was like, like a couple days later, I'm thinking, I want to go see it again, but not because I want to see it again. Like there's some standout scenes that I want to see, but just because I want to understand it. Like what happened in that movie? I just don't understand like where it kind of went wrong in places, and I want to understand it and kind of work through that. In this movie, I'm sitting here going, I want to watch it again because it was fun. It was good. And now that I know the twist at the end, it's like, yes, let's see this. Let's see what it's like. I think that would be really fun. As for the characters, I said earlier that I think Alden did a great job as Han Solo. He had the facial expressions. He had the lack of confidence that was kind of feigned confidence. I felt like it was really well done. Obviously, him and Chewie had a great relationship throughout the movie. It was definitely very Han Solo and Chewie. Donald Glover killed it as Lando. He couldn't have done any better. It was perfect. Beckett with Woody Harrelson was a really cool, deep character. He had a lot more depth than I was expecting. And the double betrayal at the end was like a really good demonstration of that. Kira was fun. She was kind of boring at times, but you could tell there was something going on there. You know, you could tell that she knew what was going on behind the scenes and didn't quite want to say it because I don't think she knew how to tell Han, everything that was going on there. And the other characters were fun. Like L3 was a great droid. She had some good moments, but that kind of, she had some humor that felt really flat. And in fact, I feel like the entire movie had humor that felt really flat. And there were some jokes that came off on screen and nobody in the theater laughed. There were a couple times where I was giggling and nobody else was. And I'm thinking, that was definitely meant to be a joke and nobody laughed. And it kind of gets me on the point where I feel like some of the humor, some of the jokes that they've been doing lately are not, I think they're going too far outside the Star Wars universe. They're not feeling very Star Wars-y. You look at, episode 7, for example, all of the humor in that felt just like dead on to me. It felt like a Star Wars movie. You even look at like the original trilogy with like C-3PO interrupting like the kiss between Han and Leia and stuff like that. Like that stuff is funny. It's done really well. The humor in this movie it felt like it kind of went too far. And a good example of this is when L3 is breaking into the docking stuff, like the star dock, and she's cutting through the fence, and she gets the little tool out to start cutting, and she says, you guys need to turn around. I can't perform while you're looking at me. It's like, that's a really, really funny joke. But I don't think it's a funny joke in Star Wars. And I giggled, but I felt kind of uncomfortable giggling at it. Like it didn't really belong. That joke didn't belong there. And actually a lot of L3's humor, while really funny, didn't feel like it belonged within Star Wars. It felt very out of place. And there's a huge ordeal going on of people saying like there's a feminist agenda being pushed on L3, which is being pushed on the entire audience. I don't think that's the case. I think people are taking the jokes a little too far there, but that kind of gives you a good idea of the humor doesn't feel like it necessarily fits. It's a similar problem that The Last Jedi had, like with the your mom joke at the beginning of the movie. I laughed at it when I was in the theater, but then I kind of thought about it for a second after I went, that didn't feel like Star Wars. That I shouldn't have laughed at that. That shouldn't be. It's funny outside of Star Wars, but it's not funny in Star Wars. And it's kind of a weird thing to have to discuss with people. Like, what is humor within Star Wars? Well, I don't think it's that. And I don't think the I can't perform joke is Star Wars, even though it is a funny joke and I did laugh at it in the theater. I don't feel like it should be there. And again, I feel like L3 had a lot of those moments where you're like, ooh, like, something just feels off about that. But it's not just her fault. You also have plenty of the other jokes in the movie that I don't feel like were that funny in the theater, and definitely nobody laughed at them. Outside of that, you've got Dryden, which is a great bad guy. Paul Bettany just killed it. I feel like he did a great job. You have Emphas Nest, which is like the leader of the mercenary gang. She was great. Her character was awesome, and she showed some really cool power at the end of the movie, which you weren't really expecting. Then, of course, you have Darth Maul, which was a huge surprise, but really good. I kind of want to talk about Darth Maul for a second. So with Maul, many people who never saw Clone Wars or Rebels or anything like that, they kind of missed out on his story of how he comes back. He basically goes crazy when he fell down the pit. He's kind of left alone. He goes crazy. He builds himself some like crazy spider legs. Then the witches of Dathomir go and retrieve him and kind of bring him back to his sanity. kind of, and he gets a little crazy. But essentially, his storyline is he then creates, or he then controls, a shadow collective, which is a group of like many different crime syndicates. So in this case, we know the Crimson Dawn is one of them. There's the Pike Syndicates, people on Kessel, which were mining the spice, which is it's used as a drug in the Star Wars universe. Then you have the Black Sun, the Death Watch, and part of the Hutt clans. So, by the way, the Death Watch are a Mandalorian clan, so people like, Boba Fett. So you add all that stuff together and you have the Shadow Collective, and he controls that. So the fact that they mentioned other, like syndicates, crime syndicates in the movie, and it's like, oh, we can't like go against them because like they're on the other side. We don't want to create like a gang war. But at the same time, I'm pretty sure Darth Maul controls all of that. So that wouldn't really happen, even if that were to be the case. They were talking like maybe they should go to Kessel and get the unrefined coaxium. And I think it's really cool, and it adds a lot of depth for the people who have seen the Darth Maul storyline and kind of understand where that character is sitting within the universe. It's cool to look at that and be like, you see him at the end of this movie and it's like, oh, it all makes sense. Okay, so the Crimson Dawn is part of the Shadow Collective. He controls all this stuff, everything that's going on. Cool, I understand, I get it. And there were criticisms leveled at like Darth Maul's really cool on screen. You hear like the whatever the song's called, the Phantom Menace song. Crap, what is it? Duel of the Fates. It popped in my head. You hear that song briefly while he shows up, and then he like grabs his lightsaber and he like swings it around in front of his face and everything. And I saw some criticisms like, why did he have to do that? Why did he have to show us the lightsaber and stuff? And it's like, well, for people who have seen, the Clone Wars and Rebels and everything, it's like they're showing the lightsaber because it's like, oh, cool, he is using that lightsaber, so that kind of confirms continuity. And then showing it, put it in front of his face shows like the twisted nature that he kind of got himself into, and it was just a good way of showing that. So I think for people who watched that stuff, it was a huge payoff to see him there, and it was a huge surprise because I heard about like some cameo being at the end of the movie, and I was like, it's going to be Boba Fett. And even in the background when they're all fighting between Han Solo, Kira, and Dryden, you see there is a set of Mandalorian armor there, and you're like, oh, that's really cool. Is like Boba Fett going to show up? Is he going to be the thing? Like, is he the cameo? Because they just announced the Boba Fett movie. It's like, oh, what is it going to be? And it turns out, no, Darth Maul surprisingly is. And it's like, and in that moment I went, oh, that makes sense. The Shadow Collective and everything. And it was a cool payoff for me. And I'm sure it was a cool payoff for everybody else who knew what was going on there. For people who didn't, you're like, oh my gosh, it's Darth Maul. How did he live? And I think that is also really smart and really well done. So, gosh, they did a great job with that. And I think that, to me, it felt really cool and it felt well earned. And another thing that kind of goes along with that is a criticism that I also heard was like, when the heck does this movie take place? Like, when is it in the timeline? And people have kind of worked out where it is, which is about 10 years before A New Hope. So at the end of the movie, it's about 10 years before A New Hope. So he has like 10 years of going to see Jabba the Hutt and doing the job, and obviously getting himself in a lot of debt from the beginning of that to the end of that. So he has a lot of character growth between that and A New Hope. But you got to remember that the major Darth Maul episode in Rebels is like 2 years before New Hope. So there's a good 10-year chunk there where they could do additional movies and have Darth Maul be involved in that. And that's really cool and exciting. And in fact, with them doing a Obi-Wan movie and them reintroducing Darth Maul, it's like, oh, that would be perfect. They need to do that. They need to do some kind of confrontation with them too, if they can, in that movie. I think that would be really, really freaking cool. But just so you know, it's about 10 years before A New Hope and about 20 years after Revenge of the Sith is kind of where the movie sits in between of it. And in fact, it's because it was like, 3 years? I think it was 3 years between the intro of the movie and when like he actually goes and starts doing the Empire stuff and leaves the Empire. So that makes it like 7 years after Revenge of the Sith is the intro to Solo, where he's where he's trying to escape from Corellia. I believe that is the case. So that kind of gives you an idea of where the movie is at timeline-wise. But let's talk about like all of the different references. There's a really, really good list of them on the Star Wars subreddit that I'm pretty much just going to use as a reference point. But there are a lot of really good stuff in here. So, right, like at the beginning of the movie, you have the gold dice, which obviously are Han's dice that does tie-ins to Last Jedi. It does tie-ins to the original trilogy where we've seen the dice. So it's the dice. We see his dice. The funny moment with him, with Solo and Lady Proxima on Corellia, when he pulls out the rock and he goes, "This is a thermal detonator." Everybody freaks out and you're like, oh, this is a nice nod to when Leia does this. And the fact that it was a rock and he just throws it, it's funny. It was a good reference, I believe. Then there was like the droid, the AP-5 from Rebels during the chase scene on Corellia. There's a part where they get to the Imperial checkpoint and someone's saying, move along. And they're like, oh, that's funny. Stormtrooper doing that, a New Hope reference. You have Han using the Moof Milker kind of slang or whatever you want to call it, which he uses on Unkar Plot in episode 7, and he calls Chewie that. Then Val, which is great. This is I had a great moment in the theater with this when she says that they could have hired Bosk or the Zan sisters. Bosk cracked me up. I had a huge smile on my face as soon as she said Bosk, and I was like, oh, she just said Bosk. I know who Bosk is. And I was like, oh, I looked around. I looked in the theater. I looked to my left and my right. Nobody reacted to it. I was like the only one in the theater that knew who Bosk was. And I was like, damn it. But it was kind of cool. He's one of the bounty hunters that you see in Empire Strikes Back, and that's just he's like the Trandoshan dude essentially, which is like the big lizard guy. Rio, which is the alien dude with like the 4 arms that we get at the beginning of the movie, early-ish in the movie, I guess. When he says, "I don't know, you've never been to a Mynock roast on Ardinia." Mynocks are those like weird, like leech things that are in the big creature in Empire Strikes Back when they go into the like asteroid and they're like all over the ship. That's what a Mynock is, just in case it like went over your head, which is fine, whatever. Then you have all this stuff with like Scarif being mentioned by Kira when they're talking about the coaxium being able to be found. C-3PO had mentioned in A New Hope the spice mines on Kessel, so then we actually get to go there. So that goes all the way back to like the first movie, which is crazy to finally like go there now. You have the Pike Syndicate, which we know from the Clone Wars TV series, which are on Kessel as well. So like that stuff is all really well referenced and documented, and you actually get to see what they look like in the movie compared to what they look like in the Clone Wars. It's not that far off. It's really well done. You have the hilarious scene with Lando pronouncing Han, and then, Han Solo obviously corrects him, but for the rest of the original trilogy, Lando continues to call him that, so that's a really good call out. Han Solo mentions that he owns a VCX 100, which is the Ghost from Star Wars Rebels, which is funny to kind of have that there because they're similar freighters in a sense, so it's funny that was mentioned. And that's another callback to like the Rebels and the Clone Wars series. Like this is why I think people who enjoy those movies are going to enjoy, or those shows are going to enjoy this movie a lot, is because there's a lot of call outs for that. When Lando talks to Beckett for the first time, he calls out that he killed Aura Singh, which is a bounty hunter, again in the Clone Wars TV series, but she originally made like a 2-second cameo in the Phantom Menace, which is, whatever. She's just a random character that they put in there and then used for Clone Wars. So it's kind of cool that we know that Beckett killed her, which I don't think we ever knew of her demise. Then you have the whole call out of Han Solo saying like, oh, this guy is a hustler. He's talking to Lando. He says, I don't even think he's got a ship. And if he does, it's going to be a piece of junk. And it's like, aha, another piece of junk reference for the Millennium Falcon. You have Beckett interrupting the Han and Kira kiss, which is just like what C-3PO does, which is really funny. On Kessel, Beckett was wearing the same outfit that Lando wears at Jabba's palace in Return of the Jedi, which is awesome. It's kind of cool to see that, which is funny because it's like, well, I wonder if that is just kept on the ship, and then when Lando, takes off, he keeps that, which is why he has it for Return of the Jedi. Who knows? But it's kind of cool to see it. Chewie on Kessel pulls the arms off of one of the guards. He just pulls both of the arms off, which again is another reference to A New Hope, which is being called out there. When they are talking about L3 and after L3 has died, and they're trying to do the Kessel Run, and how her brain has her like, she has like the navigation stuff, and they connect her to the Millennium Falcon. It's interesting because in The Empire Strikes Back, when C-3PO is trying to, talk to the ship, and he's doing his little thing there, he describes the Falcon as having a peculiar dialect, which is very fitting of L3. I think that actually works out quite well. It's funny. It's just like how much stuff that they keep in continuity with the rest of the movies, and it actually works out quite well. The Falcon's radar dish gets knocked off for the 4th time in this movie, if you count all of the other ones that it does in. You have the moment with Lando and Han back on the planet where they're getting the coaxium refined, and Lando says, "I hate you," and Han replies, "I know." And it's like, it's a really fun, like, "I love you, I know" moment. You have the whole call out for Tatooine from Beckett about going to find there's a big shot gangster putting together a crew. One of the people on Enfys Nest crew for the Cloud Riders is Weasel, which is played by Warwick Davis, which he's been in most of the movies now, which is great. I love seeing him. But Weasel was in A Phantom Menace. He was one of the kids, and he's played by Warwick Davis in that movie too. So it's fun to see him as like the character return in this as like one of the little mercenary groups, the rebel groups. Also, Two Tubes, which was seen in Rogue One, is in there as well. There's the whole Han shot first thing, which is great, but outside of that, we've kind of talked about everything else, minus the fact that Beckett keeps calling Han Solo kid, which he then does to Luke throughout A New Hope and then on. So it's kind of cool to have all those references. Again, I think they did it in a really smart and clever way where it ties things together. The continuity feels a lot stronger because of it. And it reminds me of like when at the end of Rogue One, when the ship is getting away and the Corvette is, they got the plans and they're like passing it off, and you have Darth Vader doing his thing, and they finally get it and they take it and give it to Leia, and then they jump to hyperspace, and you're like, oh my gosh, like this is the beginning of New Hope. And it felt like a really cool moment where it kind of ties that continuity together. I think they did a good job with all the references in this movie to kind of have a similar effect, in my opinion. But those are my thoughts on the movie, and those are all the crazy references, and there's a lot more in the movie that I've probably forgotten. I think there was something with the chess set as well, but I don't quite remember what that one was, and I couldn't find it looking it up online. But I kind of want to know what you guys thought of the movie. Did you enjoy it? Was it fun for you? Were you bored? Kind of where were you sitting on it? Because on, a second pass, I haven't gone and seen the movie again, but I feel like I should. I feel like I would enjoy it even more now that I kind of know what I'm getting myself into. I felt like the movie was really well done, and the acting was phenomenal, and the writing was pretty good, and the twist at the end was great. It's a fun action movie, and that's more than you can say about a lot of other action movies that come out. Some of them are fun, some of them are bad. This one just happens to be in Star Wars, which makes it a little bit more fun, although probably a little harshly criticized, in my opinion. Outside of that, I've got to do my Last Jedi video, which I plan to do within the next week or two. I'll put that up for you guys so you guys can kind of get my opinions on that movie, which are lengthy and might be longer than this video, but trust me, it's going to be a wild ride on that one. Let me know what you think of Solo in the comments below, and we shall see you guys next time.